Hello, and thank you so much for watching Healing Words, brought to you by the Dolores Jean Lavin's Center for Humanities and Medicine. I'm your host, Jacquelyn Fletcher. Healing Words is a participatory show that explores the relationship between writing and healing. That means we're going to ask you to actually try some things with us today, so I hope you'll get out something to write on. It can be a notebook, a mobile device, a computer, whatever you like to use. As we all know, words come in many forms, in poetry, in written stories, in songs. My guest today is a writer and an actor who will perform his powerful words for us here at Mayo Clinic. Michael Milligan is a Juilliard-trained actor who has performed on Broadway and stages across the country. He's an accomplished Shakespearean actor, but his latest passion project is a one-man play he wrote called Mercy Killers. The play has received 5-star reviews from coast to coast, and as a Broadway Baby reviewer put it, this show is one-man theater at its very best. Michael, what an honor to have you with us today.
Hi, thank you. It's great to be here.
So tell me a little bit about this show. What is this show about?
The show is about Joe, who is an auto mechanic from southeastern Ohio. He's a blue-collar guy with a red state perspective who discovers the lengths he has to go to take care of his ailing wife. So the play is actually set in a police station, so he's giving his testimony about something that has just happened, which I'm not going to say what it is right now.
Yeah, don't want to ruin it for us.
Yeah. So it's an exploration of, primarily it's a love story about the lengths that Joe goes to try to take care of his wife. It also examines issues around the financing of healthcare and also the personal struggles and the dynamics that come up when you are when your partner is sick and the kind of ambivalence and the struggle to take care of someone, but also dealing with feelings of anger at the system and resentment and all those kinds of things, which is something that I'd never seen on an episode of Grey's Anatomy or ER or House.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a really important theme to explore.
Well, I was so incredibly impressed by how deeply you went into the research when you were working on this play, and we'll talk about the emotional research you did in a little bit, but I wanted to start with just some of, you talk a lot in the interviews I've seen of you about the medical, when somebody gets a medical diagnosis and then they're hit with all of the bills, and then you talked a lot about the bankruptcy that happens after that. Can you talk a little bit about that research you discovered?
Yeah, I came to it initially from my own experiences. I had 3 experiences with medical issues, both a partner, a friend, and then myself, that all happened within the course of 9 months that completely, suddenly opened my eyes to some of the problems that people have, especially people who work in the arts, which is a business, a passion, a vocation where there isn't a lot of job security. And so you're often hustling after medical care. So that sort of, I had those experiences, and that's why I decided I was going to write a piece. And so I read as many books as I can about our healthcare system. I interviewed doctors and other healthcare workers, and then I put together a draft, and I started to perform it. I just started to do readings and perform it. And during those initial readings and performances for the first year of the life of the play, people would come up to me after the show and share with me little details about their experience, and also doctors and nurses might say, oh, actually, you might change this little bit here. And so it's really been a collaboration over the life of the play. On top of all that medical stuff, there's also been the collaboration with the character, Joe, who, as he's become more and more fleshed out, he's sort of asserted some editorial, control over the piece as well.
I love that. I love that. Well, and one of the things that you talk about I believe it was in another interview I saw that someone did with you around this character, Joe, that you built.
Yeah.
And all of these people that you were out doing the show for in front of, which is one thing I love about plays, is that you can get feedback while it's still in development. It can really change what the words and what's happening on stage. And you talk about a letter that you carry in the pocket of your costume. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was early on when I had first written the piece. A big concern I had was, is this too much? Does too much happen to this guy? And I learned very quickly that, unfortunately, the travails and tragedy that occur in the play are not that uncommon, and people would share with me personal experiences. Like one of the first performances I had was in Athens, Ohio, and this dear old lady picked me up to take me to the performance, and she said, "Oh, it's really timely that you're here. Old Mr. So-and-so, he actually committed suicide a couple weeks ago. He was diagnosed with cancer, and he was afraid that his family was going to lose their land." And I was like, wow. I mean, that sounds like a sort of American myth, something that from Steinbeck or something. But another situation like that, a young man saw the show and wrote me a letter afterwards about his mother's struggle with cancer and a similar experience, and it was very, very moving, and it was very similar to some of the things that happen in Mercy Killers. So I keep that in my pocket because I've performed this, 250 times.
Wow.
And I don't want it to become easy.
Yeah.
I want to still have the same passion for it and the same sense of responsibility to tell the story. So I keep that letter in my pocket to remind me that it's still an important issue.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you connect to someone's real story out there, and also you've made art out of it. Because I think what's so beautiful about art and about literature and about words of any kind is that, we can use them to connect with each other. Mm-hmm. And we can use them to, witness experiences and to normalize them and to have other people connect with us so we're not so isolated socially.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you found that to be working in this experience.
Yeah, and a big part of the touring around of the show, which I often have performed in sort of improvised spaces and intentionally created the show so that all that's needed is a table and a chair. So I've performed it in libraries and community centers and classrooms, and I performed it in a doctor's living room in Toledo, Ohio, and I always like to have a discussion with the audience afterwards. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes someone will share something publicly about their own experience, whether it's someone who's a patient who's gone through something, or oftentimes a doctor or a nurse will share about their frustrations or sadness working within the system that the play has triggered. And it's very powerful for people, other people in the community, to hear those stories.
Yeah.
And I don't know how otherwise they might get to hear them in that way.
I love that. Well, and I think that stories are, you know, you also mentioned something like this, that stories really allow us to humanize really hotly debated topics. I mean, healthcare in this country is a massively debated, topic. But I love, there was something that you said, that, you know, doing a play like this allows people to open their hearts, to actually talk from the heart, from an empathetic place. And it says, we never communicate, this is something that you said, we never communicate from the space of human empathy rather than political talking points. Mercy Killers is an appeal to people to open their hearts. The heart has to be broken, cracked open like a seed so the flower can come out. I love that. I love that. And it's true. It is absolutely true. Because you've given us so many examples of people opening their hearts after they've seen this show.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting. It's really across the political spectrum that people respond to the piece. I've performed it, you know, in Minneapolis, which is a certain way. I've done tours of rural West Virginia, rural Colorado. I did a tour, just came back from a tour of Texas, and it's really what's the most profound experiences are when you do get an audience that has a real mix of people from different economic backgrounds, different political identities, and when they sit together and hear the story and then start to talk, it can be difficult sometimes, but because they've just witnessed this piece, the conversation is on a different level than how people talk on Facebook or on, you know,
that's right,
comment threads on news channels and stuff like that. And so it's been very, very powerful that way.
Well, and so this makes me think, you know, you as an artist went so deeply into this character, and you really brought up these beautiful emotions that caregivers feel. And this character, Joe, is just, I mean, the comment after comment where he's so real, these things that he's feeling are so true. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience with caregiving that helped you to go so deeply into those feelings.
Oh, well, I'm not great at it. Yeah, it's difficult, and I really, truly, as I've traveled around the country, I oftentimes work with nurses. Like I did a tour of California with California nurses, did a performance here for Minnesota Nurses Association, and oftentimes in those tours I'll just stay with people to keep the overhead low, and so I've spent a lot of time with nurses. I just drove around Oregon with the guy who drove me around, was a retired nurse, and wow, the stories that they have to tell are incredible and make me deeply admire people who go into nursing. And yeah, I didn't quite answer your question. But
That's okay. That's okay.
But I do think that we like to think of ourselves as being, you know, of how we will respond when we have to take care of a loved one, a parent, a husband or wife or child. And, you know, people do rise to the occasion, but there's a lot of dark stuff that goes on.
Yeah, well, and that's the stuff that, I mean, people feel so shameful about.
Feel
you know?
ashamed, and guilty.
And guilty that there's this.
And anger.
Yes, anger and love, and I'm upset with you, but you're sick, and so there's all sorts of really complicated feelings that go on.
And we don't know how to deal with those things.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's, you know, there isn't a lot of information or or a place to hold that kind of stuff. I'm sure maybe there is here at the Mayo. I'm sure it's something that is discussed, and
yeah, absolutely.
but it's a real issue, and I think what the play explores is how much of those complicated negative emotions come from just human experience, universal, and how much of them do we add to the situation by making getting sick such a awful bureaucratic and financial trial for people.
Yeah.
I actually had a medical thing come up last year that really took me out for like a month, and I was just floored by how complicated and difficult it was to organize everything. I had piles and piles of paperwork and bills and forms, and this is something that's in the play that I had imagined. and then you know, I started to have a little bit of experience of it, but I actually had a month off from touring around, and I was like, wow, how do people deal with this stuff if they're also in a 9-to-5 job, or they're old and aren't, or for whatever reason their illness isn't making it difficult for them to think clearly.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's a question that the play asks. How much of this is universal human experience, and how much of this is something that we construct and have created and allow to continue? Yeah. And that was a question that I performed this play in Scotland, at the Edinburgh Festival, and that was a very interesting experience because there's people from all over the world there. So, I'd get different responses with different accents. How can you allow this to happen, you Americans? Or, right, you got to take care of that. But what I got from that was, this is a play. This is an American play, and these people from Germany and Scotland and France, they have a very different experience about healthcare. And I think that is a really extraordinary mirror for us. As art is a mirror, so is also travel. Yeah. Yeah. And looking at other cultures, and not to say, these people are better, we're worse, or we're better, but to see it's just different. And there's really incredible diversity in how people have set up their healthcare systems.
Yeah, and I love that, you're performing this play, you're opening people up to conversations, and you're opening people to a way into asking those questions of themselves and of the place that they live. But one of the things I wanted to make sure we talked about today in the play was that this character, Joe, who is struggling because his wife has been through a medical crisis, is sitting being interrogated by a police officer and through the entire show. And one of the things that Joe says to the cop at the very beginning is, if you want me to cooperate, you have to hear the whole story. And that just gave me chills when I heard him, the character say that, because, isn't that what we all want? We want somebody to listen to our whole story. We want that sense of belonging and that sense of understanding, and that you see me, you hear me. Mm-hmm. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about that. I just got absolute chills when he said that line, when Joe, your character, said that line.
What do you want me to?
I'm just curious about how you think how we all feel that sense of needing our story to be heard.
Yeah, and that's a part of this piece is when you see Joe initially in the low light, he's very scary looking, or aggressive, and you make immediate judgments about who is that person, which we all do of all kinds of different kind of people. And then the play is structured so that gradually you really see his humanity and his love for his wife. And so I think that's such an important thing to remember, and takes us back to what we were talking about earlier, which is after the show, people realize, oh, the numbers that we're talking about when we talk about healthcare, when we have these debates about healthcare economics, and those numbers are people. And so regardless of our political affiliation or economic philosophy, we have to remember that when we're having the discussion, that we're talking about human beings. And that changes the quality of the conversation. Yeah. And so I hope that that's something that the piece does. And I want to just share one interesting experience that I had doing the piece. I performed it in a community near Oakland, California, and it's a working class African American neighborhood, and the members of this church, the deacons, wanted to bring the play in, so I did it in their community room, and there were maybe 120 people there. And someone actually asked me to leave right before the show started, because I get into character, so I was looking like this very scary, menacing guy, and she was just like, I'm sorry, but you can't be here right now. She was like, what is this guy doing here, in the hallway? I was like, no, it's me. I'm about to perform the show for you. And she's like, you? What are you? So I did the show, and it was the best audience that I have ever had in terms of the reception and the empathy for the character, which I didn't know going in how it was going to be, because Joe is, I don't know how else to say it, but he's kind of a redneck from southeastern Ohio, and I have family from there, and he says some kind of racist things about black people, about immigrants, about all sorts of people. And so he is not someone that they should empathize with. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But they did. And what I got from that experience was, in this working class neighborhood, they know more that people go through these experiences, that people go bankrupt, that people lose their homes, and their whole lives become wrapped up around trying to get medical care. And so that was more important than, racial identity or political identity or anything like that. Yeah. And so it was a very, very moving experience for me. Yeah. The power of theater and a story, of getting past that initial impression that we have of people.
Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful example. And, it kind of answers my next question, but I just want to ask it just in case you have something else to say, because through this whole experience of writing this play, you've got another play that you've been working on now, mm-hmm. That's also based in kind of the medical world. And I'm wondering if you could tell us, as a human being, how has the writing of this work opened your heart?
I think the transformation that's happened for me is going from being a kind of mercenary, feeling like a kind of mercenary artist, actor, where you sit by the phone and you're waiting for a casting director or your agent to call you and tell you that someone wants you. Yeah. Usually for something that you would never ever want to do, or would ever watch or go to, but you're dependent on it, so you're excited. Oh yeah, I'm going to do it. So this has been an experience of no, this is exactly the story that I want to tell. This is the kind of theater that I want to create. And I can do it anywhere I want, so I can take it to that congregation near Oakland, or the congregation in rural West Virginia. I mean, I feel like I'm having a an incredible adventure and experience of America. And like I said about, performing in Scotland and the response in Germany and France, and it's as wide as that here in America. Like, people's experience in Texas is very different from Minnesota. Mm-hmm. The healthcare system is set up completely different. They have totally different dynamics in their, in their politics and in their everything. And so it's been extraordinary to see, oh wow, this is what Lancaster, Pennsylvania is like. This is a small town in Oregon or Colorado, and so it's really given me an appreciation of the United States, and it's been great. Yeah.
Well, and you've had to perform this a lot of times all across the country in all of these different places and overseas, mm-hmm. and up to, it's like 200 to 250 times you've done this show. And I'm wondering, so on our show, what we always do is we offer prompts to our viewers. Mm-hmm. So people that are in the room, patients or caregivers in the room, can actually try the exercises that we're talking about. And I would love to have you offer up an exercise that you do to get in touch with your imagination, so you can access your heart.
Yeah, this was also a reason why I created the piece, was that I felt over the course of my career that things were getting a little facile, and that I wasn't really going as deep as I wanted as an actor, mostly because of the limitations of the way rehearsals are set up and stuff like that. So with a one-man show, you can work on it as long as you want, as however you want. So it was an opportunity to set up a little laboratory for me to work on my acting chops. And the central challenge that I set out for myself was, what if I just create very strong imagined circumstances in the play of the events that happen, the places where things happen, and I walk on the stage and I just open my mouth, and I don't know how it's gonna come out. I don't know in this moment, am I gonna be upset? Am I gonna be loud? Am I gonna be soft? I don't know. What if I let that go and I just trust that if I remain in this imaginative space, that it will be compelling and dramatic? So that's been a sort of ongoing challenge. And so it's made me think about, both in terms of writing and acting, how when we write or when we speak on stage, the primary thing isn't the words. The words are describing something else. Mm-hmm. The words are describing an image that we have in our mind, or an experience that we've had, or a feeling, and oftentimes we set the cart before the horse, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what intimidates people about writing. They're like, oh, what am I going to say? What words am I? No, you don't have to worry about that. You just have to. If I ask you, what did you do yesterday? Blah 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 blah. You can talk for a long time. Or if I ask you about, tell me about your mom or your something, then you drop into that world of images and memories. So in the play, but we can practice this ability and we can cultivate it so that we have much more ready access to this encyclopedia of experience and memories that we have. So
it's called sense memory, right? The exercise is called sense memory.
Yeah, this is a sense memory exercise. And at Juilliard, the first year you're there, you spend the first 3 months trying to have this kind of mystical experience, recalling the drink you had for breakfast. This has been going on in training at Juilliard for 40 years, trying to recall the taste and the smell of your experience of drinking your coffee or your orange juice in the morning. But anyway, in my play, Joe talks a lot about this waterfall that he goes to. And this is a real place that I went to in West Virginia, Blackwater Falls. There's a little place in the woods that I know about, nobody else knows about, and you go there and it's, And so over the course of time, I can really go there in my imagination. And so when I go there and I tell you about it, if I talk about it, you know, about the little rivulets and the streams, and I can be half here and half there. Mm-hmm. And so the issue of, oh, this is the 250th time I've told this story is no longer important because the water is still, you know, cascading down on my head and the sunlight, and I can see it, I can feel it. And it's always new because there's always a million new details that I've forgotten about that are waiting for me to rediscover, almost like a treasure. So,
very cool.
So the beginning exercise, I would say, and I do this with my students, I teach at Stella Adler in New York, is to go back to your childhood house, a house that you grew up in, just pick one, and you just start to walk down the lane or the driveway and really try to see, smell, touch things as you approach the front door, go in, and look around. Look around, and there's no right answer to the exploration. It's just allowing impressions to come from this store of memories that you have, of real sensory-based details. And as you're doing that, at some point something will come along that'll be like, oh my gosh, I remember the advent calendar on the kitchen closet. Oh, and the details of one of these little angels or something like that. And it'll be like, the experience is like you've been thinking about it all this time and you just forgot. It's like it's been there all this time, and when it comes back all of a sudden it's like, wow.
Yeah, and then you can start pulling those details out and writing them down,
yeah,
right?
writing them down.
and you have it all there.
Yeah, and
then
then those details lead to
to
a much deeper place of the narratives and what was going on, and impressions of maybe your family, or all sorts of things.
Yeah. Well,
And so to me, there's a closet in the hallway, and that's like my Narnia, right?
Yeah.
So when I deeply have reimagined and envisioned my house on Dempsey Road, which no longer exists anymore, it's been turned into condos, but it's still very vividly there. When I'm in that space, then I can go off into imaginative realms that don't exist. Does that make any sense? Like I believe deeply that deep memory and imagination are deeply connected with each other.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I hope everybody will try it and go back to their childhood home and see if they can remember all the details. And speaking of the fact that you use this in your shows, you have done a performance here at Mayo Clinic of the show. And usually we do readings in our show next. We ask our authors to read, but instead we're just going to go right to your performance of the show. So thank you so much. I'm so excited to see it.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
But no. Doctor says that we can get it, right? Just cutting the affected area out. It's a partial mastectomy at this point. So we go in and, yeah, man, it's a nightmare. But look, it don't end when she comes home, because those bills that are coming back, man, they almost as scary as the surgery. The first one is like $14,000, man. And we still got coverage at this point. We're not even into the chemo yet. So what I did was I put the house on the market, right? Just to see what we could get, because we bought bigger than we needed, because we were thinking about starting a family, but with the chemo and the bills coming. Anyway, look, it seemed like a miracle when less than a month we found a buyer. Of course, we didn't find a new place yet, so we just rented a room at the redneck Riviera, man, the freaking trailer park. That's not the best place to be doing treatments with Jerry Springer's circus going on 24/7. But no, we hung in there a couple months. We found a nice place with an extra bed because we were still thinking about bringing in a kid at this point. And then oh man, sorry. Jesus. I guess not.
I'd like to offer another exercise for you to try. But instead of getting out a paper and a pen to write, I'd love to have you play with words in a different way. I do a lot of public speaking, and I found I can't write a speech at the computer. Instead, I have to go out for walks and talk the speech out. I have to say it over and over again until I've crafted what I want to say out loud, and then I write it down. So instead of pulling out your computer or a notebook, ask for some privacy and turn on the recorder on your cell phone or simply speak the words out loud. To get started, close your eyes and imagine yourself on a stage. You're sitting in a chair, much like Michael often does in his performances. There's a spotlight on you and an audience out there, or maybe just one other person sitting across from you. Now's your chance to tell the world what you believe. Now is the time to share your feelings with that someone sitting across from you. You can imagine that you're an actor and you're telling your whole story, or you're giving your speech as class president, or you're talking to the country as the President of the United States. Why not? What will you say? Give your speech. Accept your award. Embody the role you choose. We all know how to do this because we did it as children to learn how to be humans. Just watch a room full of toddlers and you'll see a room full of actors making speeches about all sorts of things. Once you're finished, write down a few notes about the experience. How did it make you feel? Did you make yourself angry, or did you cry, or did you laugh? Did you learn something about yourself that you weren't aware of before? Do you feel like sharing your words with someone else? Now, I hope you'll really give this a try instead of just watching us talk about how helpful these exercises can be. What do you have to lose? It'll be fun, I promise, and it will only take a few minutes of your time. Research has shown us that curiosity does all sorts of wonderful healing things to your body and spirit. So get curious and see what you can discover. I'd like to thank Michael Milligan for sharing his gifts with us today and for making such an impact on this important topic. If you get the chance, visit his website at mercykillerstheplay.com to see if he'll be traveling to do the show in your area. And watch for information there about Michael's new play called Side Effects. Thank you to all you budding actors and writers for watching Healing Words. I'm Jacquelyn Fletcher. If you'd like to try some of the exercises you've heard today but don't have anything to write with, you can ask your nurse to contact us and we'll get you a notebook and pen. You can reach me with any thoughts or suggestions or arrange to have a writer visit you in your room by using the contact information on the screen. Until next time, my friends, be well.